Hey, welcome to the Friday video for the Harlan Sweet channel, and might be the last one I do before the Christmas break because it'll be Christmas next week, and I'll be just busy with personal life. But there might be a couple of videos or so, see how I can fit in my schedule. But I thought I wanted to round up for the last one um, because actually, really quickly after we come back from a sort of Christmas break and a New Year's break and a holidays, however happy holidays, how the Americans call it. We're just gonna be straight into like playing like store championships and like DLC. Like Richmond will be back as well. And I kind of wanted to go a video saying where I kind of think everything is at and like what's the best choice or like what are the obvious choices and maybe what would be the best thing to play. So I went through sort of a tier list of what I think is the best right now in the current meta snapshot. I think it's pretty cool that things keep changing around. Like if you look at a snapshot of week one of this, Ruby Amethyst just wouldn't have been on the list. Green Blue I think would have been right at the top as well. And I think Blurple as well was out of contention. But I think this is sort of where it's at. So if you're looking to prepare for a store championship room, if you're maybe in Europe and you're not going to be playing in the DLC over in America, or you're praying for the DLC in America, I feel like this is the way I would look at things are gonna how decks are gonna land out and what's gonna be most popular. And I think that C tier at the bottom can be just completely ignored, and you can put in any order you want. I don't really mind. I think it's I just realized I'm a little. I think they're just sort of random decks that might turn up and might have a little bit of a run, but let's be honest with you, they don't have too much of a life in them. So we can just ignore that C tier. But starting going next to the beta, I think these are all decks that people sort of pet deck and let's be honest can win. Like there is hope that they can win. The Monstro combo deck that Zan played showed that people were playing it, and I'm pretty sure people love that deck. Like whenever I did when I did a big event in the UK during the time when the first iteration of the Monstro combo deck was out. People were there playing it and they just generally wanted to Monstro combo. They did not really care if they'd won any games that week or any games in that event, whatever. They just wanted to Monstro combo. So I think the Amber Purple is not to be ignored. It has won a CCQ now. I think we still have a bit of surprise factor with it. I still think you need a very good matchup run into a lot of like purple steals and stuff like that. But I think it's easily just a very strong choice still. So it's right at the top of the beta, and then next you've got sort of all the green purple piles, and again it's like the Speci build. I think that's a cool deck. That's top cutting event. It's doing all right, but again it needs a very good run, and everyone sort of knows what it is now. And I'll admit, with that deck being around and Chromodogs being around, it kind of puts you in a position where item hate might not be that uncommon. I think especially into DLC, you don't want your run to end because of some random items that you've never really heard of before. So I feel like that's like a strong B tier, but that's about it. And the three at the end, you've got Amber Steel. I just wanted to wrap these up quickly because there's not too much to talk about. Amber Steel, again, is just like, that's very much a lot of players' color combo. That's all they play. That's what they like to play. It's still pretty fast. Nala is a very powerful card. It uses a lot of really powerful steel cards. It can high roll you. It's still not bad, but of course, I think at the higher level, a lot of people have dropped the deck recently, and I still think it's good. I know a lot of people in like the local area who don't really want to drop it either, and just saying to them, Mowgli has been a very powerful buff to them, but of course, by the way that everything's shifted, it's not appearing as one of the stronger aggro decks. And it can't play Steel Song anymore, so it kind of falls down there. And then you've got like sort of blue, yellow, which is the princessy builds, aggressive princo builds. They're fun, they're whatever they are. And green still as well, it has a lot of stuff. It can still use the Philip combo. People like green steel. Green steel is again a bit of a pet deck, but it goes right at the end of the B tier. I think the A tier is the most interesting one to look at because the S tier, and I've got a couple decks for the S tier, and like if you want to play those two decks, where to look and stuff. But I think the A tier is the most interesting because the S tier is kind of for a while now been very clear that those two decks have very strong, even with having sort of semi bad polarizing matchups, it's still just matchup spread and power, just pretty strong decks. But the A tier, yeah, I think right in the end, like we've kind of come to the realization that green blue, I think it's fairly fragile. I've only seen a very small handful of players pilot that to any sort of major success, and even still, like we're not seeing it appear here and there too many places. It did very well in the Wakefield DLC, which is interesting. But whenever I talk to the American players, they're like, no, that deck doesn't exist over here. It's not very good. But in the UK, it was like the second most popular deck. So, if you're playing UK Store Championships, I think maybe think about it. But overall, I don't see it turning up too much. It's probably the only control deck real control deck in the game right now. So people will play it. People love to just play control. I think it sort of just lays there at the end of the A tier where it's pretty good. I would be surprised if it doesn't top cut in Richmond. I'll be surprised if it doesn't win some store champs. But I think its fragileness to aggro decks. A lot of decks are designed purely just to beat blue decks. You know, like the green purple aggro decks, the blue yellow princess aggro stuff as well. Its matchup into Blurple never feels that bad. It kind of almost feels play draw whenever I've played it personally, and a lot of the Blurple like diehards say that it's even better than that. You're actually favoured, or it just feels mad that they should be saying that. But yeah, it just feels like what you gain out of that deck is not a lot. It can have some absolute insane high rolls. It has full board clears, you know, going around things like ward and resist, but overall, it just feels like it's probably at the end of the A tier slot there. And going on to, of course, the deck that I would play if I went to the event. I think just because the two decks at the top are in S tier doesn't mean you'd have to play them. It just means obviously their power levels are very strong and they're performing a lot better than the other decks. But, you know, it comes down to player preference, what matchups you see. You know, if I brought dogs, but every round was against Ruby Amethyst and Purple Steel, I would say this was a bad choice to bring. And if you brought what's it called? Sorry, Purple Steel, and every round you played against Blurple and Ruby Amethyst, you're probably like, this was not the best deck to bring. But you know, I feel like every deck, yeah, kind of. That's why I find this A tier so interesting, because all these decks could still win it. We've seen Blue Steel win other things before, and in like Law League, it was quite doing well in the top 8 cut. But yeah, for me, I think I put it there. I think it's just does a little bit better than Green Blue does. I think because it can achieve things like 2-0 wins against Purple Steel and can beat Ruby Amethyst fairly all right as well. And, you know, it can clean up a lot of the lower, these are like, and also into, sorry, that where I'm trying to word this is, into the sort of anti-blue decks like the Green Purples and the blue yellow princess, or like any, like I'm sorry I keep using blue yellow princess like there's going to be thousands of them. There's not, but you know, there's a lot of decks right now designed, like the green purple, especially the Speci build, we use that as the example, designed just to beat blue decks and hopefully get blue matchups all day. I feel like Sapphire still has a bit of a better game into them. I always feel like Sapphire still has a better game into dogs than Green Blue does, because you know, you just get things like, get very good on plays, you get like Tinkerbells, you get Vincenzos and Hades, you get things they probably don't want to bounce because the on play is so good, and then throw a couple spooky sights in there and you actually have a fairly alright matchup into dogs, whereas Green Blue kind of doesn't. It needs Under the Sea combo, it needs Under the Sea, or it needs to combo with Prince Philip, which can be snatched from your hand by them as well. So I feel like it just has a bit of an edge, because Sapphire Steel is a very good matchup into Purple Steel on paper, and its dogs matchup I think is a little bit better than Green Blues is, but I think its matchup into Blurple is horrendous. I think Ruby Amethyst is fine if you're playing optimally, but you know, I think it's there. I think definitely, like, you bring Sapphire Steel and your mate says, how are you doing? And you go, I'm great, I've just played 6 Purple Steels in a row and I'm running hot and haven't missed any ramp or missed Cinderella. You know, I'm doing very good. I can see it definitely getting into top cut and getting a lot of people Continentals qualifications. I think the issue with Sapphire Steel is it never really goes the whole distance. Wakefield was like probably the biggest time it ever went the whole distance in an event. If we look before rotation, before bans, it was always lingering around in like top cut, top 18, and like winning a few Mickeys for things like Justin Morales and for people, sorry, like Justin Morales and Jonathan Lamb and Bad Vegas and people like that, you know, but it never went on to like win the entire event or even I think get into finals of DLCs. But that's kind of Sapphire Steel's always thing. It always does pretty good, but you know, getting people with some achievements, but it's not going to go the whole distance. So I think, yeah, it's a strong pick, and definitely if you're familiar with it, if you have all the cards for it, especially as cards are getting quite expensive right now, I think it's a very strong pick as well. I don't think I think anything in the A tier can be underestimated. Anything A tier and S tier above are just all strong choices in my opinion, with, you know, the S tier having a bit of a strength to it. And the next one as well, of course, is Blurple. I think Blurple just being a little bit better into Sapphire Steel, and it also is pretty good into Purple Steel. I don't think any Blurple player is like, I want to see the dogs matchup, but I've always felt the dogs matchup, because they have Into the Unknown and Hades, they kind of, you know, don't get a better matchup into it. Like generally, if they miss one drop, they can just lose that matchup on the spot. But you know, having the ways to play around the Chromacon feels pretty nice. I've seen a lot of talented Blurple players just very happily take that matchup on, you know, and it's just consistent. Like I say, even their green blue matchup's not too bad. It can have a little bit of a fault into these sort of the aggro pile decks. I think it would struggle a lot more into the green purples than the, and the, you know, just but still aggro pile decks, like I'm saying. But, you know, overall, I still think it's a little bit better. It's just a little bit more consistent, and we're talking about going the distance, you know, like with a DLC or a Store Champs where you have to win, you know, 6 to 12 rounds. It just feels like Blurple has that more consistency. You know, overall, it's going to be doing the same thing every game, ramping on 2 and playing that 4-drop early. So I feel like it has just a little bit of an edge over Sapphire Steel, but to be honest with you, I think that margin's a little bit thin. And, you know, Blurple has been going all the way to like finals and stuff, and it's been consistently doing well, and it's just the consistent ramp purple deck, isn't it, really? Like that's all we can say. It gains Demona and it gained Hades as well, so yeah, I think that's a pretty good choice. But then I think the next one, because it's sort of I don't really have much more to say about Blurple, because I think, you know, everyone knows what it does. It's pretty good, and it probably has a shot at just winning the events. I think if players like DKP and stuff bring it, or just anyone really, and it just has a fairly good run with it and sees the matchups they want to. But the next one then we'll go to is Ruby Amethyst. I think it has a little bit more of a jump over, and I think because Ruby Amethyst has a tremendously good matchup into dogs, I think it has, if built correctly, sometimes it's like some of the cards I think that help it, like Mother Gothel and the 4-cost Hercules legendary, are not in the builds, but when they're in the builds, I think it sometimes has a very good matchup to Purple Steel. I was watching the streams over the weekend, and we saw like Thoris, who's Thoris Evans, or I know the username is Thoris, a gentleman I chat to, is a lovely guy, just making that matchup look like real easy work against Purple Steel. And I think he went on to have a very good run against Purple Steel. So I feel like Ruby Amethyst, saying that it has like a good matchup in the two decks above it, is just a pretty good spot to be in. I think it can struggle a little bit into green blue, into Blurple, and even purple, and even Sapphire Steel. You know, it still struggles a little bit into all these things, but whenever I've seen like the worst matchup for a Ruby Amethyst deck, they still just curve out into a Demona or refill their hand and play more stuff on the board. And if they're good enough to use the library to draw more cards as well. So the reason why I put it at the top of the A is I think that even in its worst moments, it's still doing a lot better than some other decks. You know, all of the 3 Sapphire decks below it, they can miss ramp, they can miss key components, and they can just lose the game and just not go the 12 rounds that they need, or 10, 12, whatever, 6 rounds if he's playing Store Champs. You need to get into a top cut. Whereas like Ruby Amethyst, it's arguably, you might miss a 1-drop every soft one, you might miss a 2-drop like one turn, but you still just curve out into just really powerful lines, and you're basically asking the Sapphire decks, and even the Dogs deck as well, that will need to go wide, slay the 7-cost, get the Chromacon down, do all those bits. You're asking it like, can you, because I'm going to do my thing, I'm going to curve out as a Ruby Amethyst deck, but are you going to be able to play your game plan optimally? And sometimes you do. Like I have many games where I've played Sapphire Steel into Ruby Amethyst, and it's looked completely one-sided for the Sapphire Steel game. And then the next one, you know, I missed the ramp on 2, and that's what lost me the game, or I missed the Cindy, or I don't have a very good 6-drop to play afterwards. I'm going to have to play Goliath, which on the draw or something like that, and refill their entire hand. So it doesn't feel amazing there. But yeah, it just feels consistent powerhouse, like the way Ruby Amethyst always has been. You know, the way that it was quite a popular pick in past events before rotation. It's in that back sort of, it's back into that sort of strength and that powerful spot it's in. So yeah, it definitely, I think it deserves to be the, if I don't want to play the 2 decks at the top, I probably play Ruby Amethyst. And if I don't want to play any of those 3 decks, I play the comfort picks, which is like, and if your comfort pick isn't Blurple, Sapphire Steel, or Green Blue, I'd probably have a look at trying to learn one of those decks, one of those 6 decks there, from the S to the A tier. But the two at the top, I think, Purple Steel, I think just slowly, but just behind the margins of Dogs, really, mainly because it's the most consistent deck, like matchup wise, it's pretty good all around. But it feels like when you're on the draw, sometimes the deck just doesn't feel that powerful. So if you won the die rolls all day, I think you're in a tremendous spot. Okay, playing 1, 2, 3 and singing Strength from Purple Steel on the play feels like the most powerful thing you can do. When you're on the draw, you sometimes don't get to achieve that just because you're going second, and they're able to maybe sing Strength at you, or ramp to their Clarabelle, sing You're Welcome, or whatever they're going to do. But on the play, it feels tremendously strong. Whereas Dogs, I've always felt like on the play, on the draw, I prefer to be on the play, but on the draw, it never feels like it's that bad of a game. You know, it still has pretty rough matchups into Purple Steel and Ruby Amethyst when the pilots are at the same skill level and stuff. But I just feel like Dogs, just matchup spread wise, is just a lot better and just putting in a lot more results. I've been playing it on the sim that we don't talk about, and tremendously, I mean, it's just, it's so many things are free. And I think there's also something to mention as well, that with dogs. If you brought Blurple, you could bring it, and your round one could be against that blue-yellow princess deck that I'm going to keep bringing up, and it's just a bad matchup for you. Everything's got ward, you can't really remove it, and it quests for like a billion. Whereas dogs into that deck just sort of cleans it up. It has a very good matchup. I don't think it even cares if it goes second. You know, you're just fine into that. So anything that's like random, not what you expected to see, like interesting decks and stuff, like dogs just tends to clean up all of those decks, and you have a very good run. And then so you get out those early turns of Swiss, and then you know you may have to play into some purple steals, but if not, if you seal the Sapphire decks, you're pretty happy and you get a very good run. Even into the purple steel, I'm realizing it's not that bad because dogs is very much consistently going to go wide, either tramp or chromacon, or even do both, and it's asking the purple steel player to like play hook into Calhoun, and some of them only run 3 Calhouns as well. On the draw as well, you might just not be fast enough. The dog's deck might just be able to go quicker than you and just race you, and then go you, and then 5-cost lady and spawn more stuff on the board and just keep questing. You know, it might just be too quick for you, and it just feels like that's the power level of the deck. The deck's consistent on top of power level. Not to say that some games when you play dogs, it won't just go horribly wrong and your hand is like 2 Under the Seas and a 5-cost lady and a chromacon. That does happen. But matchup spread wise, just win rates, it just matchup spread and win rate for dogs just feels arguably better than anything in the game. Even into the 2 like boogeymans for the deck, which is purple steel and ruby amethyst, it still feels like it's very winnable. I think chromacon demands people play with very thin error margins where they can't really play anything wrong, or even things like if you're playing ruby amethyst and you have the 5-cost headless horseman, it's making sure to use it in the correct order with the chromacon, and then on top of that making sure to take out the right target. You know, it's so many micro decisions that one of them messed up can be wrong. Like I've played against it many times where it's like they'll either quest letting me remove something from their board for a fairly favorable trade, but like shift 5-cost lady or whatever, or on top of that just hitting something and going, oh, I forgot about that, or you know, just bouncing something back. You know, just all those little micro decisions, which we do have the take back rule now, which is pretty cool, but sometimes it's too late for that, and it's just very powerful, I think, and it's very consistent. And also as well, I think something that's great of an aggro deck is what I've always loved about them is that if you really don't know what you're doing and you have no game plan or understanding what to do with your hand, you just put it all on the board and full quest, and the deck can quest for like 11 lore in 1 turn sometimes anyway, and you won't even need a chromacon because you win in 2 turns. Whereas we'll go back to purple steel, and I picked that deck up right at the start of the set. I think it's pretty fantastic. I think you're going to face a lot of mirrors and not really have any edge into it. And I feel like for me personally, the purple steel mirror is worse than me playing dogs into purple steel. It feels like I have less agency. It feels like I'm mainly just hoping they don't have strength, and they don't draw better than me. You know, if they're going to strength genie into a dock into a Demona and I'm just losing the game, I don't really care that much. Like it doesn't feel great, and on top of that, you know, just purple steel and ruby amethyst I don't think are amazing matchups for it. I think they both I think the ruby amethyst one's probably pretty even, but the purple blurple one's pretty rough, and the blue steel one's pretty rough as well. I think blue steel wants to see purple steel all day, really. But yeah, it feels like its power level is so good as well. Like the 2 decks at the top, I say, are the most consistent decks in the format, which is probably what gives them the S tier rating. So if anyone's looking at this and thinking it's a terrible thing, it's mainly just the 2 at the top are very consistent and can probably go the distance in rounds, whereas the other ones are required to have a very good day. Sapphire decks are required to have a very good day to play out all their rounds and win the game. And I just realized it's going on for a bit and I'm just blabbering on about random stuff. So I think if you know what you want to play, if you want to play anything A, B, I think they're fine. B, I feel like you're asking for a lot, especially at a DLC. Maybe not a store champs. You can probably get a B tier list through. An A tier list, like, again, I think if you're confident and you like the deck, very much a strong choice. And the S tier ones, like, you know, they're just the obvious power choices, consistency. And I'm gonna like just cover like a couple lists that I think are worthing at. I think Diego, gentleman who won Toronto DLC last set. Like, if you're into playing dogs or you want to play dogs, like his list is the one to look at. I feel like anything that I would show you that I would call my list would just be his list. So definitely worth looking at that. And it's also always worth looking at Diego's list, who's like the purple steel guy. He's like the best on the deck, results wise, just performing at events. And this is a list from Singapore. which was a best of one event. So maybe take a bit of this with a grain of salt and look at his other builds and look what else he's playing at events. But these two players, you know, Diego for Purple Steel and Diego for Dogs, like the two probably players worth mentioning, and you want to check out their lists if you can. But yeah, that's sort of my approach to like the way the meta's formed and where we're at. I think we've got some interesting stuff, like the combo deck came back out of nowhere and Sam managed to have a really good run. I think that was kind of preying on there being a lot of Purple Steel, though. I think because it's got a pretty good match with the Purple Steel, they can't really destroy the Monstro. I think besides that, you know, maybe we don't have too many secrets. I think maybe there's some more interesting ways to build Ruby Amethyst with Shark and stuff like that still lingering around. But overall, I think pretty interesting meta and pretty excited to see what happens at the next DLC.